Thanks everybody for participating tonight or watching and watching.
And I'd also like to recognize Jill Belchamber Glazier, who is running the technical side of the Zoom meeting tonight, and we appreciate her help with that. Each person who is a pre-registered resident will be able to ask one question, and I will call upon you in the order that you registered for you to ask your question, and I will give the counselors 5 minutes of time to answer that question, with each of the counselor alternating who answers that first. And after the counselors are finished, then I will also give you an opportunity to, if you have a follow-up question that you want clarification for, or something around the answers that you heard from them. Once we're through the questions of the residents online, I have a list of questions that were submitted beforehand, and I will ask Krista and Mark those questions if they have not already been asked and answered. So I guess we will begin with Kim Kettlewell.
I think we just lost her.
Uh-oh, the wonders of technology.
Mm-hmm. Well, we could probably move on to the first question, and then
Sure.
Hopefully she'll be back in time.
Okay, so the first question that we have then submitted to us is from Larry and Sandra Guth, and it's around the restructuring. Their question is that 2 full-time permanent positions within Southwest Middlesex Facilities and Rec have been eliminated. This was apparently done in the name of restructuring on account of necessary savings. But they also state that the exact same month, new employees, up to 4, have been hired working out of the admin office and introduced through the Southwest Middlesex newsletter. The benefit our community sees from having full-time permanent local employees within the Facilities and Rec division far outweighs another individual sitting in an office in an administrative capacity. How does eliminating full-time permanent positions from the municipality embrace the life, work, and play mentality that you continue to promote? And Krista, do you want to start answering that first, or?
Sure. We start with a tough one. So I just wanted to address a little bit about the employees that we hired the exact same month. So some of those positions were actually in our building department. And so we ended up having sort of a restructuring there as well, in the sense that now we have a shared service agreement with Adelaide Metcalfe and North Middlesex. So while those 3, I think it's 3 in total, but 2 were mentioned, have been hired, they've actually been hired by Adelaide Metcalfe, and one of them were our chief building official, Shannon, has actually lives within a municipality neighboring ours. So I know it says she comes from Ingersoll. She was the CBO in Ingersoll. The other positions that have been filled, one of which was filled by a local individual, is a maternity leave. So while it seems like we've done a lot of new hires in our mid office, most of those positions, the only new position really is our economic development, and it was filled by Sheila, who had been our deputy clerk before that. So the other thing I want to talk about, because I want to make sure I give Mark time, is that some of this was for necessary savings in some ways because of what has happened with COVID. But the other side of it is to offer different types of services. So one of the new positions that's going to be coming in the spring is going to be someone who plans rec programming. And that person will be responsible for setting up programs in Appin, for example, hopefully yoga, or bringing in a sports tennis pro at the tennis courts in Glencoe. And it's to really fill our buildings with programs that our residents can use. So it's changing the structure of our department in the sense of having a balance of part-time and full-time employees. The other side of that is we've seen the benefit that Public Works has with this sort of dynamic, and that was some of the idea behind it. The other part of it was why we wanted part-time employees. With COVID-19, it provided us the opportunity to be flexible and to pivot. So I think we'll talk more about that. How many minutes left do I have, Mike? Because I want to give Mark.
You're at about almost 2.5.
Well, then Mark can go, and I'm sure we'll have more opportunity to talk on this.
Okay, thanks, Krista. And on the staff changes, I guess I'll just try to touch on a couple employees you didn't mention that are mentioned on the front page of that newsletter we sent out back in September. Andrew Neely is our new drainage superintendent, and he's been with us since February. And actually now he is also covering for Adelaide Metcalf 2 days a week. So, but the utility part, he was drainage and utilities superintendent. Now he's strictly drainage, and he's doing that in Adelaide Metcalf as well. But he's our employee, and Adelaide Metcalf will pay us for his work over there. So that's a restructuring too. And Christy DeWally is at the front counter during a staff leave of absence. Now, I was into the municipal office, I think it was just yesterday, to sign a sympathy card, and I saw 4 employees in there, and all 4 of them live within Southwest Middlesex. So we do have quite a few employees that live in Southwest Middlesex. In the public works department, there's quite a few that live in Southwest Middlesex. How much more time do I have, Mike?
About a minute.
Yeah, so on the top end of the restructuring, and for me, that was an easier decision because Steve McDonald left, who was our facilities and rec person in the office. And I always thought maybe we'd be better off having somebody else out of the office doing that work instead of somebody full-time. So with this restructuring, Greg Storms, who was our public works, the head of our public works department, is now head of public works and facilities and recreation. And so we're actually going to have one less person in the office. So there'll be some savings there. So that was the top end of the restructuring. Well, and then on the bottom end of the restructuring in facilities and recreation, that was a lot harder for me, but we'll talk about that more tonight. And there's going to be changes in public works too, but since that hasn't been totally finalized, I really can't talk about that except to say that I think there will be promotions there or changes in people's job descriptions in that department, but nobody's going to be let go, and there will actually be local people, I believe, that will actually be promoted, given more responsibility. So yeah, probably I've used close to my time.
You are. Thank you. We don't have anyone else. Kim hasn't reappeared yet. So, there she is.
I'm here now.
Hi, Kim. Would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Okay. I don't know if is my video on?
Your video is not on. We can hear you though.
Okay. Okay. I'll start off by expressing my thanks to Councillors Mark and Krista for providing this opportunity to share our concerns. I've been watching some of the virtual council meetings and have noted that council states they are focusing and investing in building our community and attracting new people, both residents and businesses, to Southwest Middlesex. As Mayor Mayhew himself stated, our small rural community should be a place for its residents to live, work, and play. This brings me to my concern with the recent council vote to approve the elimination of full-time positions in the Rec and Facilities Department with the reason of restructuring. These positions have now been replaced with temporary seasonal positions that were not offered to the previous full-time staff. This vote resulted in job loss of some long-time standing employees that not only live and raise families here, but also took pride in their work and community, often working extra hours and flexing their shifts in order to support a community event or need. There was not a shortage of work, and these staff actually worked shorthanded during the pandemic due to employee retiring with no one immediately filling the position and the failure to hire and retain students over the summer. The municipality has recently prided themselves with their level of communication, yet nothing has been shared about a restructure that happened over a month ago. There has been communication about other positions in the 3 newsletters and updates that have been sent out recently, but nothing about the restructuring of this department. So it appears that only partial updates are being shared. I'm hoping that you can answer the following question. First, why did council vote to eliminate permanent full-time positions within our municipality when the workload level was still high? And secondly, why has nothing been shared about our recreation and facility department restructure despite multiple newsletter and council meeting updates?
Thank you, Kim. I'll let Mark begin answering this question first.
Well, maybe I'll start with why has nothing been shared, re the restructuring. And I would have liked to have shared more by now, but since it affects both public works and facilities and recreation, it really isn't complete yet. The changes on the public works side aren't finalized to the point where we can release that information yet. And I think they will be soon. And on the facilities and recreation side, a supervisor is going to be hired, and that hasn't happened yet, but I think I can say there have been 11 candidates apply for that position, and I think it will be filled soon. So when this restructuring is complete, there will be more information coming out. But as far as actual, it's like with most places, when there's changes like this made, there really isn't an announcement. I mean, different places I do business have had restructuring, and since it's a human resources matter for liability reasons, nobody will really discuss it with you. That's just typically the way things are done. And that's why it's being done that way in this case too. And unfortunately, I'd like to say more, but I can't really. So Krista, do you want to reply to that question too?
One of the things that I heard, and others on council received the same communication at the beginning of the pandemic, was why we hadn't laid off our entire rec department immediately as soon as we found out that things like baseball would be canceled and soccer would be canceled. And as you mentioned, Kim, there was work that could be done, and that was part of it. And to talk about, so that's a portion of it, and I'll get back to it. But one of the things that we were approached with as a council was the idea that whenever a senior staff member chooses to leave the organization, there's the opportunity to consider a restructuring. And one of the things we got feedback about was how there seemed to be, this was an opportunity to do something for our rec department that overall hopefully would have a benefit in the long term. And one of the things was, in the past, we had Jed Raycraft, and he was, as we'd mentioned before, more of a on the ground, hands-on sort of manager. And so that's what they were looking at, was taking what used to be Steve McDonald's role and bringing it back into the organization. And there would be no assistant position. It would be a working manager with no type of other position. Furthermore, with the retirement of Raymond Campbell, it meant that we chose not to replace his position. So actually 3 full-time positions were removed, and part of it was to provide that flexibility with what was coming from COVID. So going back to the fact that we had received a lot of feedback about it, in the sense of why do we even have a rec department? And it does create a nimble and flexible rec department. Unfortunately, we've heard today from our own Middlesex London Health Unit, Chris Mackey, that now the arenas may be impacted again, in the sense that some of the orders that he's put down may result in having fewer than 10 or 20 people on the ice at a time, which could potentially eliminate our hockey season. And if that's the case, what will it mean for the rest of our ice time? Now, we don't know if that's what's going to happen, but that's what those type of orders are meaning right now. So it's that idea that with COVID, we had no idea what was going to happen in our rec department to be able to say, let's continue on. We had the opportunity to make a decision because we lost Steve and we lost Raymond. And so we took the opportunity because it was going to be more affordable now than it would be in the long run if we ended up having to lose our whole department as a result of COVID, for example. So I think is my 5 minutes up?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay, so follow-up question.
Kim, did you have any follow-up questions that you'd like to ask?
She's muted. Oh, there we go.
Okay, so yes, I'm hearing what you're saying about the decision with replacement for Steve's position. And it seems like it was a decision to create a position in between the assistant manager and the Steve's previous position. But it doesn't necessarily answer the question about why the decision to eliminate those positions. I don't think you answered that question.
And some of it was the whole idea of a restructuring, in the sense that if our arena has to close, what will it mean for those positions anyways, as a result of what we're seeing? And part of it goes back to, we have a lot of, at least 3, I think, temporary part-time positions in our roads department. And so part of it was to change the type of position. So for example, there's a need for ice operators in the winter time. However, the same need for that same type of employee is not seen in the spring. And so that's when we can bring in, whether it's a contract for grass cutting. I'm not saying that is, because I can appreciate that sometimes grass cutting contracts haven't been so successful, but it's trying to find that balance of, okay, so we have employees that are worth, $30 an hour on this side, doing work with ice operation and having, benefits in full time. And then there's that balance of bringing in a different type of employee. And one of those, for example, would be the program coordinator. So when we talk about live, play, we're missing a big part of the play as a municipal partner. So we have amazing partners like the skating club, like the hockey, but almost everything we have in this community is something that's brought on by a service group. And so I think many on our council think that we as a municipality need to step it up and bring some programming. And this is part of that. So we're going to be bringing programming in as a municipality to offer our ratepayers, similar to how we offer swimming lessons. And so this is us taking the next step and sort of totally changing the way we provide rec services and changing the type of employees that we have in our rec department.
Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
Just maybe that, this decision was, well, probably for all of us on council, was probably one of the most difficult ones we've had to make in this term of council. And when I made the decision, I just tried to do what was best for Southwest Middlesex. And I knew it would upset some people. And yet I felt that I still just had to do what I felt was best for Southwest Middlesex. I think that's what we should do when we're on council. And so that's what I did. And I'm sorry if that's, offended anyone.
Thank you. And thank you, Kim, for your question. We will, once we get through some of the questions, if we still have time, we'll circle back and and see if you have another one. Next question. Is there anyone else online right now?
Matthew Zombag, I'll bring him in.
Thank you.
He just needs to unmute.
Okay, I think I'm now, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
Matthew. Welcome,
I can
and
hear you, Matthew.
go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Thank you for facilitating and moderating this town hall open forum tonight. First of all, I would like to thank Councillor Krista and Councillor Mark for giving me the opportunity to ask a question or two tonight. I would like to echo Kim's thoughts on the restructuring of the Southwest Middlesex Facilities and Recreation Department. As a former employee of that very department, as a summer student for 2 summers, I learned firsthand the pride involved in serving our community. I understand the pride that we took in keeping the facilities clean and orderly and to the best standard. I am very disappointed in this decision, and I am concerned that by hiring seasonal employees who are more transient, that the level of standards will not be maintained. My question is, what are the cost savings in our restructuring of the Parks and Recreation staff, including all of the following: the savings on the salary of the terminated staff, the hiring back, and then the offset of hiring back part-time employees, as well as rehiring back a member who has retired to fill in the meantime, as well as the severance pay of the terminated staff and any potential job-specific trainings that all new employees must maintain in order to be successful maintaining their job. And if there's any other costs that may be associated that I am.
Thank you, Matthew. I will turn it over to Mark.
Okay, I know I wish I could say more about some of these issues, but I can't really speak to anything to do with employees specifically. I do have your questions, your written questions up on the screen here in front of me. And one of them was, is Southwest Middlesex also going to terminate employees from other departments to save money? I would have to say to that, no, there's no plans to do anything like that. And I had heard concerns from you previously. You thought maybe we might have trouble hiring new people because of the way we treated these 2 employees that are no longer with us. But actually, it appears that we're getting good applicants. And one of them, Justin Leach, who has taken the other, Cody Goff already had the one position for seasonal, it's seasonal full-time. Justin Leach got the other one, and he lives in Glencoe, I believe. So he's somebody local too. And then we have somebody that has worked at the Agriplex that I believe is from Mount Bridges, filling in right now along with Raymond Campbell. And as I mentioned earlier, we are hiring a facilities and recreation supervisor that will be like a working manager. So a different role than either Steve McDonald had or Jeremy Feasy. Maybe it could be more compared to what the role Gerald Raycraft had when he was with the municipality years ago. So yeah, I think maybe I've answered some of your questions, and I wish I could answer more.
Krista, would you like to have a turn?
So I just wanted to mention, unfortunately, if there was a severance paid or not paid, we can't speak to that at all because it is confidential in nature. So I apologize for that. As it comes, so hiring back the employee that retired, that happened as a result of one of the positions. So I think there's been 4 new hires, but 2 of them are part-time. So it's a balance between the 2 part-time positions. There's a lot of financials when it comes to what they're doing that we haven't quite seen. And we will be having our 2021 budget that begins November 4th. So part of it was we will take into consideration a part of that in how much it costs with regards to having a balance between part-time employees. Was there cost savings? Yes, there is a cost savings with having part-time people versus full-time people. Some of it goes down into pensions, some of it goes down into benefits. Do I have an exact number that I can give you? Not at this time, but will we see an operational savings year after year, long term? That is a part of it. And I think both Mark McGill and I can say that a big part of this decision isn't just about finances. There were a lot of different layers that went into this. And some of it was an increase in service, some of it was savings, some of it was about potential opportunities that may or may not come our way. I'm not sure. And this was, this I'll talk about later because it goes, talks about the actual building of the arena. And I've had a question come in about that. But overall, unfortunately, Matthew, I can't answer a lot of your questions because of the fact that they're financial and I don't have the numbers. But do these people come in at lower pays than what someone who worked long term? Yes. But was it made based solely on financial? No, it was overall a mixture of COVID, a mixture of totally changing the way the department runs, and a balance between the 2.
Thank you. Matthew, do you have any follow-up for them?
I do.
Please go ahead.
So understanding that we're not going to get too deep into financials, that is understandable. But I do hope that at some point that does come to light. But with that all being said, and this part of it being that there was a hope to restructure in a sense to provide more opportunities, were the terminated employees offered other positions, or was there a meeting done to see what facility or what they could bring to the table that may fall in line with council's decisions? Were there opportunities that we had one of these other positions that they could have stepped in and filled the shoes for? I would say that one of those guys was probably already helping fill in Steve's shoes when he left. So was there any consideration, discussions with those employees about how they could still serve Southwest Middlesex, since they are community members, raising families here and being active in the community?
Thank you, Matthew. Krista, did you want to start by answering that?
It's really hard because it does come down to HR, some of those details on whether or not. So like qualifications and the other kind of things in the balance of like, I can say from my own experience that when a position is eliminated, it can be considered constructive dismissal by offering any position that isn't the equivalent to what they currently have. In this sense that, for example, moving from a full-time position to a part-time position could be considered constructive dismissal. And that is something that I took into consideration because I've been in situations like that personally. And I really can't say a whole lot more than that. It's a, like, I know this is totally and completely unsatisfying as an answer. And I'm sorry, like I'm really, really sorry about that, because it sucks. And I wish I could tell you, you know, everything I know in my brain, because it wants to spill out. And because of how personal it is, like really, and I don't even, like, I should have been like, hey, sit down with a lawyer and be like, what's this question? What can I say about it? And none of that happened. Mark and I are just trying to do our best to explain as much to the community as possible about the decisions were made. So Matt, I'm really sorry. I can't say were they offered another position or were they not offered a position, and then why weren't they, or why were they, kind of thing. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mark, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, sure. And I think I kind of have to echo what Krista is saying. And I'll just say, you know, this kind of restructuring happens a lot of places, although just because it happens a lot, of course, that doesn't make it right. And every situation is different. But for example, the place where I bank, there was restructuring. The place where I buy my crop inputs, over the years, there's been various people that were there, and then their positions were terminated. But even though both those places I've mentioned, you know, I'm a customer, I own shares because they're both cooperatives. But if I went in there and asked the manager, you know, what happened here, he couldn't tell me because it's a human resources matter, and he couldn't tell me, and so I can't either, unfortunately. But I can say, you know, with all these situations, there's labor laws, and so you can't just terminate people's positions and give them a handshake, you know. And we followed all the labor laws, and people were compensated to the fullest extent of the law. And I think that's about all I can say about that. I'm sorry, I can't say more.
Thank you, and thank you, Matthew, for your questions. Krista, is there anyone else that's live there for
Yes,
questions?
I'll add them now, and you can.
Or do you want me to go to the pre? Sure. I have two there. Shannon Havens, do you have a question? I don't know how long to wait here for unmuting, or
she could maybe just be participating to watch.
Sure.
I was able to confirm that with many of the others.
And Kim Hathaway, do you have a question?
I did ask my question, but do you want me to ask more questions?
You're coming up with a different name, so that's.
Oh, yes, I had to relog in.
Oh, okay.
When I ended my question, it ended my session.
Thank you. Can we come back to you after we ask a couple questions from the people that submitted them? Thank you. All right. So I'll go to some of the pre-submitted questions then. I have a question here from Sharon Beecroft asking what will be done with regard to slowing traffic down on Main Street in Glencoe. Sorry about that, especially trucks who gear down right in front of homes on Main Street. And Mark, I think it is your turn to answer first.
Okay. Well, you've probably seen the, what are they called? Those things that monitor the speed. We've bought 3 of them, and we've got them, we move them around from place to place. Sometimes people think they're not working when they're just blacked out, but even when they're not displaying a speed, they're still recording information. And that information is shared by our public works manager with the police. so they know what speeds, of course, don't know what speeds specific individuals are going, but we know speeds of vehicles at certain times. And so then the police would know probably, for example, where they should be, where they're most likely to catch people that are speeding. So I think that's helped somewhat. Although since we've had those things for over a year and you're asking the question, you obviously must feel there's still a problem. But that's one way we're trying to address that issue.
So I think it's my turn. I'm going to be like, it's my turn now. I'm not sure if you can
Sure,
see this.
please.
This is something that Sharon sent me. It's a picture of a stop sign in Huron County that has a solar light attached to it to have a flashing light. And she said, this is something I'd love to see in our community. So I'm just going to start off. I have really been trying to champion hard in our community, like maybe not super hard, but trying. To make our community a Vision Zero's community. And so we're supposed to be getting a report in November. And the November for me was significant. A year ago, we had a little person who was in my son's preschool class who was killed by a transport truck, and when it ran the stop sign and killed her. And that same transport truck company in a few months prior had been caught running a stop sign on a school bus twice in 1 week. So safety on our roads is multi-leveled. We can start at a municipal level by making ourselves a Vision Zero. And that is the idea of trying to prevent violence that is happening on our roadways, in the sense of whether it's vehicular violence, trying to make our roads as safe as possible and taking into consideration safety. So if that means pushing the speed limits out as we come into town, especially as our town grows, that's an aspect of it. The other part of that is we are a component of the county. And so unfortunately, many of our most busy roads are county roads. And so by coming a Vision Zero community, the county doesn't ascribe to that. They have a different view. They think that you should pay more attention and that the police should do more traffic stops and that we should read our handbooks, our driver handbooks, and that the roads would be safer as a result of that. So it's very frustrating for me. And I hope that if we become a Vision Zero community, if all of the communities in Middlesex County did, then we would force the county engineer to maybe do something. And then lastly, the other component is OPP. So we need to champion on behalf of our ratepayers for the OPP to do some of the work that we need them to do. And so an example is when it was reported to the OPP that transport truck company had ran a stop sign, they did not follow up. They did not reach out. They did not return the phone call of our ratepayer. And then fast forward, not even 6 months later, they killed a person. They killed a little girl. So I think we need to bring all three aspects to the table. And I probably don't even have any internet coverage. Oh, no, Mark's there. Okay. Everybody just looked really still, so I wasn't sure. Did we lose our moderator?
Mike is looking very still right now.
Okay.
Do we just wait for him to come back?
Let's give him a minute. Oh, we only have 20 minutes left. Let's get Larry Goff in. Whoa, he's gone.
He's gone.
Oh, no, he's back. Whew.
Are you there, Mike?
Wow. I'm here.
Okay.
Was it just me or was it everyone?
Just you. I think Larry Goff's waiting.
Rural internet. That should have been one of the questions, but
yeah.
Moving on then. Thank you for your answers. Another question was around backyard chickens. This person has they were submitted anonymously. They have backyard chickens on what is likely considered a rural residential property. What sort of restrictions would you be willing to consider to allow homeowners like me and others who live in the hamlets outside of Glencoe to keep our birds? And I believe it is Krista first.
I personally think if you want to have chickens and you live in Glencoe, you should have chickens. However, I can appreciate that your neighbors don't necessarily want you to have chickens. So I think a balance can be struck. I have asked for there to be public consultation. A component of that public consultation will hear different ideas about how we can make this work. Now, I think it's really important to have restrictions up. Do I think there should be roosters? No. Do I think you should have 12 chickens? No. I think the max should be 4. There was a really, really good bylaw that I had added to the agenda last week. I think it was from Clearwater. I'll have to double check, but they had restrictions that had you reading the OMAFRA safety. Oh my gosh, that's terrible information about safety, biosecurity information. You had to sign off on that, and animal safety and food safety. So there was a lot of different levels that they took into consideration to be before you could be allowed to have a license to have chickens. Additionally, Woodstock has an okay bylaw that takes into consideration distance from your neighbors and the different properties. There are some communities that have bylaws that talk about how large your lot has to be before you're allowed to be considered having them. So do I, and then I think Councillor Vink mentioned it, but having them in the rural areas, I think, is a really great way to start. So if our council doesn't have an appetite to have them in Glencoe, I can totally understand that, but I think a balance can be struck. Definitely for those who live, I think there was about 500 rural residentials, and then another not quite 500 that lived in these types of hamlets. And I think a balance could be struck to allow those 1,000 people to have them in their backyard.
Thank you. Mark, would you like to chime in?
Sure. Well, Krista and I have agreed on most of the bigger issues in this council, but backyard chickens was one thing we didn't really have the same opinions on, which is fine. I'm a farmer, and my biggest concern is, I think probably for every person in town that wants backyard chickens, there's probably a lot more people that don't want their neighbors to have backyard chickens. And I kind of think we have to respect that too. But when this does come back to council in 2021 with some public consultation, maybe properties that are zoned rural residential might be considered for backyard chickens. And by rural residential, I don't mean like Appin and Melbourne and Middlesex. I mean people that are zoned rural residential, like people that are out in the country on maybe a couple acres and no neighbors close. You know, now the way it is now, I believe your zoning has to be agricultural for you to have chickens. So that's something we could look at, and we will look at in the new year.
Okay. Thank you both. How be we then now go back to, I know Kim had another question.
There was a couple of questions that we didn't cover from Larry Goff, and he's actually asked to be an attendee. So
okay,
if
sure.
we can give him a chance, I'm going to see if he's ready to talk.
Okay. Larry, would you like to pose a question yourself, or would you like me to read from the ones you submitted?
Oh, he's disappeared. Maybe we were all on the same internet connection.
Okay. I will read his next question. Oh, there he's back. Larry, would you like to ask a question in person?
If you could just go ahead and read the questions, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. All right. The next question then is that they've heard rumblings that provincial funding that Southwest Middlesex received for COVID-19 relief and aid is being utilized to upgrade the air filtration system in the Southwest Middlesex Administration Office. I would hope that this is not the case. But if it is, would those funds not be better spent to improve air quality in spaces more frequently occupied by residents? For example, the hockey arena, community halls, etc. Take a deep breath in the swimming pool or hockey arena change rooms and tell me if those funds are best spent improving air quality at the administrative offices. And I believe Mark is up first to answer questions.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Larry. I believe we received $156,000 in COVID funding from the province. And the way that money can be spent is very specific. It can be only spent on certain things. We did have a problem with people in the municipal office getting sick shortly after this term of council started. And so we've been working on upgrading the air, the heating and cooling system at the municipal office. That's something we really have to look at because there are labor rules. And if we decided to do nothing, who knows, maybe we could be challenged through the Ministry of Labor and we'd end up having to do it anyway. So, and we have applied for funding for improvements at the arena for the recreation department. And that would also benefit the curling club and the fair board. But that hasn't been finalized yet. So we really can't talk to that tonight. But I'm hopeful that funding will come, and there can be improvements made to the hockey arena. And as far as air quality or safety in the community hall, I know we had environmental testing done down at Appin Community Hall as well, and to do with things like mold and asbestos, and that kind of testing is something you kind of have to do with publicly owned facilities.
Thank you. Krista, would you have a response as well?
So just to speak a little bit to what Mark touched on, in our grant specifically, what we were asking for was upgrades to the change rooms, understanding that there's a lot that needs to be done in them, including them making them more accessible. So one thing that is positive that we can speak to is that places like Middlesex Centre have already announced that they haven't received funding, and Watford has announced that they haven't received funding from the same funding stream that we applied to. So that's something that we are taking into consideration when we think about where we're going to spend the COVID money. So as Mark mentioned, there are only specific things that we can spend it on. Some of it are expenses that we've incurred. One of the things that we did find out about our administrative office is that because it used to be, I believe, an old garage, it wasn't necessarily intended for people to spend all day, every day in. And there are two large, I want to say, air conditioning units on the top, and they're actually rather oversized for the facility. As a result, they don't run the fans properly. So that's part of this whole issue that we're dealing with. And maybe at some point, should they have replaced the admin buildings? Yeah, maybe, but this is where we're at now. And it's one of those things where we're really trying hard not to use taxpayers' money to fix the admin building. So is the grant an opportunity for us not to use taxpayers' money? Yes, it is. And as Mark said, do we maybe have to remediate this at some point? It looks that way. There's been mold that we've already had to spend, I think it was close to $20,000 removing in 2 different facilities. And the concern is that if we don't change the air quality system or the filtration system, that this will continue to happen and we will continue to have this cost and potentially have sick residents. Now, having said that, if we do find out that we haven't received a grant that we have applied for that might change things. And that's the whole thing about COVID, and the whole thing about our budget is it's about prioritizing. So if there is a chance we can get this large funding stream, we want to stick to that for now. But if something comes up and we find out that's not the case, then we on council will reevaluate it. We have not voted on this. It's just been something that has been sent to us for us to consider. We as a council have considered, I think, the first level, which is about $15,000, which is doing like an entire analysis of the building for our rate for our employees. So yes, that's that first question. If you want, like, what do you guys think about having? Oh, I'm done. Okay, never mind.
Larry, did you have a follow-up question at all that you would like to ask around this issue?
No additional questions here.
Oh, okay, thank you. And the final question then, that there seems to be, to continue to be large and costly mistakes being made with Southwest Middlesex. The entire fiasco surrounding the dump, huge costs that went into relocating the library after the land was determined unsafe for development, the dog park completed only to be relocated, sidewalks being poured only to once again be torn out and replaced. At some point in time, someone must be held accountable for these costly mistakes the taxpayers are footing. Our CAO, Jill Belchamber-Glazier, is solely responsible for the leadership staff, or for leadership, and the staff need to keep our municipality operational and, most importantly, successful. If she is unable to do this, perhaps it's time the council seriously consider some restructuring there. And I will turn that question over to Krista first.
Thank you. I think. So this one is just as tough as the rest. So thank you for challenging me all tonight, guys. My first comment is that one of the first things we did on council was to ask for a review, because our CAO had never had a review. And it is, while it is something that many municipalities do, they do ask for reviews on a regular basis. It hadn't been something that was happening in our municipality. So the type of review was recommended be a 360 review, so that it was dealing with this, everyone who has to work with our CAO 360. So counselors were asked to do a review, employees were asked to do a review, people who have to work with her at a county level, some of her peers were asked to do reviews. And then it was very confidential. And we had the third party do an analysis of it so that it could be as fair as possible. And that's the first task that we did, and we did receive feedback. And as you can see, she's still here. And so beyond that, there's a limited amount about what we can say with regards to that, but that did come onto our council agenda, so I can talk about that. And then what else have we, the other thing I just wanted to add is I can appreciate that there has been a lot of struggles that this council has gotten to deal with. Oh, apparently we did the review at the end of the first year. Sorry, my minions are sending me stuff. Anyways, doesn't matter. So the other side of things is that sidewalks, for example, yes, we did end up incurring some cost to that. And I would say that there were mistakes made perhaps by former staff. And as a result of having the temporary public works and Jill work together, we were able to have the sidewalks replaced with only the cost of having to tear them out being incurred by the municipality as an additional cost. So there's been a balance, and I think going forward, we can look at the fact that our community was able to secure funding for the new daycare that's coming to a community. Whether we haven't been cut yet for the funding for our hopefully arena. So I think we're going to finally see some positive things happen, and some of that, I mean, do we still have our fingers on the pulse of what's happening in our community? Yes. I think we as counselors need to take some responsibility for some of these decisions. I get we make decisions without all the information sometimes, and I think that's clear in some of the decisions that have been made. Should a dog park have gone over that area? No, it shouldn't have. Did someone catch that mistake eventually? Yes, they did. I'm on the fence here, so I will just stop talking and let Mark have a stab at it.
Sure. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, I'll try to address a few of these questions. And since our CAO's name is in this question, Jill Belchamber-Glazer, I'd just like to point out that those two contaminated properties, the one where the dog park was built, and I believe the dog park went in before Jill became CAO. Yeah, those two properties were acquired by the municipality before Jill became CAO. And they weren't really, well, in the one case in particular, it wasn't really given to the municipality because there was a forgiveness of taxes involved. And yeah, and as far as relocating the library, I'd like to say it could have turned out worse, because what if the fact that that land was too contaminated to actually build a library on hadn't been caught? What if that hadn't been caught before the library was actually built, and the library had been built at that location, and then afterwards it was determined it shouldn't have been built there? You know, that would have been a worse situation. And as far as the dump goes, well, we lost our liability insurance. So now I think the dump has been brought, both dump sites, enough work has been done there that I don't think we need to worry about something happen that would result in a lawsuit and us with no liability insurance would bankrupt the municipality. So at least the previous council, even though really things hadn't been run right at either dump site for years, and the blame for that goes, I'm not going to blame anyone in particular, council, staff, the operator even, you know, there's a shared responsibility with council's ultimately responsible, but that dump situation could have turned out worse than it did. And unfortunately, we're going to have costs that go on for years to come, because we have to, new Ministry of Environment rules that I believe started in 2016 say we have to test the water, we have to test the groundwater, we have to test the surface water, we have to test gas emissions from the dump, and that'll probably go on for 25 or 30 years. We have to keep doing that. And then the one we closed, the dump we closed, has to be covered with clean fill at a cost of probably around $900,000. So yeah, the dump sites are an ongoing issue, but the situation there is not as bad as it was, say, for example, 4 or 5 years ago, with them still open, no liability insurance, not in compliance with the Ministry of Environment, and the county telling us we couldn't use them for legal advice anymore because basically we weren't doing things according to the law. And I also feel, is my time up?
Yeah, I'm going to have to cut in there. We're getting close to 8 o'clock. Do we want to take one more question, or do we want to wrap it up?
I think she waited this whole time. It would be polite.
Sure. Kim, you get the final question.
Okay, thank you. So I do like what you said about just getting back about the recreation restructure. I do like what you said about offering some more programming within the municipality. I think it's really important for our youth. But generally, the people that do the tennis lessons and offer programming at the Appin Community Center, they generally don't do a lot of the facilities maintenance. So I'm still wondering who will be doing the work to maintain the facilities. Since you decided to eliminate employees that our municipality had invested quite a bit of training, I think they had about 15 and 10 years of training, and the municipality has paid for a lot of that. They're highly skilled. And now you're beginning to train some temporary staff to complete these responsibilities. And even though you said that those individuals are from the community, don't you think that they also deserve to be provided job security with benefits to entice them to stay within the community as well?
Thank you, Kim. I think it's Mark that is up first for this one.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the municipality rewards our employees quite well. Sometimes I get complaints that we reward them too much, but I kind of disagree with that. And I don't think we're going to have problems getting good employees going forward. It doesn't look like that to me. And I feel that this restructuring will actually get things done in a more timely manner, mostly because we're going to have one less person in the office and one more person out in the community doing the actual work. I'll let you go now, Krista, if you'd like, please.
I think too, when we talk about creating good jobs within the municipality, it's a tough balance as to whether we want to use taxpayers' money to create these really good jobs, and whether we want to save taxpayers' money to be able to create some kind of tangible benefit. And that's one of the things that we often struggle with when we hear about the rec department. There are some components of our population, of our residents, who want to see money spent on rec. And there are other people in our municipality who think that we need to close the arena because it is a drain. It just costs us money. We need to close the pool. It's a drain. It just costs us money. So we have to balance these two, I'll say, masters, in the sense of there are some who want rec and there are some who don't think it should exist. So how can we offer rec in a way that is palpable to everyone? And so I think this is one of those hard decisions that we had to make. Do we want to be responsible for creating good jobs? Not always at the cost of our ratepayers. And I think that's the struggle that we face, is that we do run some programs like our swimming program and like our arena programs that lose money every year. It's part of the honest truth. So how can we balance that when we have even some on council who think we shouldn't lose money on anything, and if it doesn't generate revenue, it shouldn't exist? And that's the big struggle. Sometimes we sit on council, and I remember on my first year in council, we spent more on a parking lot for the fire department than we did putting a playground in a community that didn't have anything other than grass. So it's one of those really hard balances. And unfortunately, it came at the cost of people. And to go back to your component of who's going to be doing some of the cleaning, hopefully it will be some of those part-time staff members. And that's part of the opportunity that restructuring provides when someone like Steve leaves. So as Mark mentioned, we are now going to have a working supervisor. So that totally eliminates a position in the office, and that provides another worker. So I think that's one of those transitions that we need to make mentally, is that there's still those two full-time workers in that department. And then who we add on will depend. So is cleaning the same meaningful position that putting ice is? It's different. It definitely takes different skills. And so that's what we're trying to balance, is to say, okay, so putting ice in is a $30 an hour job. Maybe grass cutting and cleaning is a $20 an hour job. And by having these split positions, we can bring those in, bring these different opportunities in. And one thing our senior staff will face is that if these positions don't fill, then we need to reevaluate and say, did we make a mistake? But at this time, as Mark mentioned, there are people applying for the job. So it's really a tough situation. And I come from a not-for-profit industry where everyone is warm and fuzzy because you're just happy to have a job and you don't make very much money and everyone's really nice to each other. And this is the balance between the two. And it's sometimes an unpleasant one because it means people are impacted.
Thank you. We've come to the end of our time, and yeah.
Can you mention Larry's last comments about the rolly bins, because I feel like we all need to.
I was going to finish on good news.
My mind.
I was going to say that we've had a lot of good but some tough questions tonight, and so thank you for the people that have posed them and who have participated in the process, and thank you to Krista and Mark for answering them. I just wanted to add that to finish on a good news note, that one of the comments or questions was a thumbs up for the new garbage bins and the new garbage system, and so that is, for my opinion too, it's the only chance tonight I've had to put in my own, and that rightly so. But I would agree on the garbage bins. I wheeled mine out tonight and was thinking about that, how much nicer it is than carrying my bin down the long laneway. So kudos to council for the current garbage bins, at least from myself and from Larry Goff. And Kim is chiming in too. I agree, they are much better. So thank you for tonight, and thank you for this idea of having a town hall so that people could ask their questions face to face in some type of group forum. And thank you to Jill for running the technical aspect of Zoom behind the scenes.